Very warm welcome to Coventry Blaze fan Robin Allen, who's joined us tonight on Clan Live Fan TV, just to preview Saturday's game. How you doing, Robin?
Not too bad yourself?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks for joining us and taking up your time.
No problem.
Tell us a wee bit about yourself, Robin. I gave you the opening there as a Coventry Blaze fan, but what's your sort of background?
Well, I've got a degree in sports journalism. I've covered a few hockey games during my time, but I kind of like to have certain sports where I just go and watch, and
Yeah,
certain sports that I work in. And as you sort of know, particularly British hockey's a bit of a niche compared to Europe, compared to the NHL. So I very much just like to try and just watch because a lot of the stuff, particularly hockey media, unless you can get into the stuff with that on Premier Sports, is voluntary, and it's kind of difficult when do you know what I mean? This day and age,
yeah,
you need paid work, and so for
sure.
me, I'd rather just pay money and go and watch the Blaze than sort of have to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So it does. I mean, we're talking about the Blaze, seventh in the league. They started the season really, really strongly, and I was very impressed with the start of the season. Then they struggled a wee bit in the Challenge Cup as well. But and so really, as a Coventry Blaze fan, what's your views in terms of your start to this season?
I think our results haven't exactly reflected in the performances. I think the performances have been a lot better.
Okay,
But say if you, for instance, you just go on the EHL website and you look at the stats and you think, hang on a minute, they're not doing very but we're not. We're very much in the game. We're very much in there, and I particularly go back to a game we had against Sheffield earlier this season, and we ended up losing it in a shootout, but we were dominating the game, and
yeah,
it's one of them. You know what it's like in hockey. It only takes a second to score a goal,
yeah,
um, and that's very much the thing with the Blaze. Although I know, obviously, in recent times we haven't had the best of results, particularly on the road, but I kind of think we've been playing good hockey now, and in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, it's normally taken till December, and then we just suddenly wake up.
okay.
And I sort of think we're not playing that bad of hockey now.
Good stuff. I mean, I've seen some of the plays on Premier Sports, and I have been impressed, with them. And I think really this season it's a very close league. There's not really much between teams, as we've seen previously. Looking back to Danny Stewart, generally brings in quite a physical, hard-working team. Recruitment's pretty spot on normally. And he brings a few gems, guys like CJ Mott, who I rate very highly.
Mm.
What's your view around the recruitment this season for the Blaze?
I think the recruitment's really good. I mean, the fact that we've managed to retain players that we would have had last season, and that we obviously had some of them at the end of the last curtailed season, and the fact that they all wanted to come back. And you mentioned CJ there, and he's one player in particular that we were all very surprised that came back.
Yeah.
But for me, that kind of says he's seen into the ethos of what Coventry Blaze organisation is all about, and a lot of the players have seen into that and actually realised it's more than just playing hockey. It's just the whole ethos around the club.
Yeah, and Danny Stewart as a coach, is that somebody you rate? What's the general feeling within the Coventry Blaze fan base? Are they happy with Danny Stewart?
I think years ago it was probably getting to the point where we were getting a bit worried on what was actually happening to the club. And then, say, the end of the last season, we were getting there where pretty much when they curtailed the season, we were everyone, whether it's fans, players, management, we're all thinking we could have gone into them playoffs and we could have won the playoffs.
Right.
And that was for the first time that we've really sort of thought, actually, Danny Stewart, he knows what he's doing. And I think that's the other thing as well, because we've done it before where we've tried to give former players an opportunity, and it's not necessarily worked out. And
Yeah.
you can see what it's like in other sports. I mean, for instance, you only look at Manchester United right now.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that he's one of these that I think it's good for continuity that we've kept the same coach.
Mhm.
And he can then also sort of bring players in that he thinks will fit into our way of playing, and also that particularly we're a bit different to some of the other clubs in the league. And I mean, you'd probably agree when you look at the likes of Nottingham, Sheffield, Cardiff, Belfast, they're very much where they can bring players in and it's all about hockey, whereas there's a certain percentage of our players where they're coming in and they're coming in as sponsored by Coventry University because they're getting a qualification
Okay.
alongside playing, and that's very different compared to other teams.
Yeah.
And that's basically, I think that's probably part of the reason why some players would come, because
Okay.
obviously they know at our level of hockey that they can quite often, there's not the money. So you kind of, when you finish playing, you need something to take over.
Yeah.
And a lot of the players, they say, even David Bro, he's like, he came here in off season. He said, I'm coming back to school.
Right.
And for him, that's, he loves it. And quite often he always says it's funny when he goes to uni and sort of he acts like the class clown, and then you see him on the ice, and yeah, he doesn't mess around.
They definitely don't. No, that brings me on nicely. What I've seen from Coventry this season, there's quite a bit of physicality there. I mean, you guys mentioned there David Brawl, and there's been a few brawls, especially with Guildford. We saw a few
Yeah.
penalties there. In regards to disciplinary stuff, I've seen that a couple of your players have picked up bans from DOPs. Do you think they've been warranted, or do you think they've just really got on the wrong side of things, or I think it's a bit unfair, some of the decisions?
I think, say with the Hamonic one, I can understand why he got what he got. I also think some of the officiating around some of the calls wasn't necessarily great.
Okay.
Because particularly when Hamonic got called during the game, um, he ended up got given one call, and then by the end of the next intermission, they then changed it and they realised, oh, it was a game. And then he then, we then just thought, right, he's probably going to end up getting a ban here. But at the same
Yeah.
time, in terms of the context of the game, I'm sure you know what it is like. Sometimes when
Mhm.
your team's down and you need someone to literally grab the ball by the horns and literally say, come on, let's get going. And I
Yeah.
think that's pretty much, he knew as the captain, he knew he needed to do something. And
Yeah.
you know what, it's like quite often it can be a fight, it needs something. And I look at it and yes, yes, I can see why he got the ban. But at the same time, I look at some of the other things, and say, for instance, when he got his ban, and then you look at Thompson, when he got a boarding call, where one of the players had literally boarded him, and he literally hasn't played since. And that
Yeah.
player that boarded him, yeah, he got thrown out of the game,
Yeah.
but he only got a 1 game ban. And you're sort of
Yeah.
thinking, well, the player that you've injured hasn't played for 4 games. So
Yeah.
for me, I kind of think it's a little bit of an injustice when you sort of think, well, you've injured a player that had to leave the game, didn't
Yeah.
return, and then hasn't returned since.
Yeah, there seems
And
to be
he's,
some inconsistency, isn't there?
yeah, and I just think sometimes as well. I mean, I noticed, for instance, when you had your chat about Guildford and mentioned their goalie, and to be quite honest, I understand he's a character, but at the end of the day, he's a goalie. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's no need. There was absolutely no need for what he did. And
Mm.
to be honest, particularly when you've got someone like David Broll, he doesn't care. Even though he's not a captain, he will stick up for his teammates.
Yeah.
And yes, him and Clements both got done, and I can understand when you actually look at how Dops broke it down, that I can understand why they got their bans. But at the same
Yeah,
time, some of the stuff what their goalie was doing, I'm just thinking you just don't do it. There's just no, you're just making people basically want to, well, start a fight or whatever. And I just thought it's going to end up now where it brings in a rivalry with a club that we wouldn't necessarily class as a rival, if you know what I
sure.
mean.
Yeah,
All through, from my point of view, a little bit of stupidity of just basically showing off just because you won a game. And I'm
yeah.
just thinking, you don't do it. It's playground sort of stuff, doing that sort of thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that because I was down at Guildford there on Tuesday night with the clan. They
Mm,
faced off against Guildford, and the goalie did celebrate, but he waited till after the game and went skated across to his own fan base. It looks like he's maybe learned from that or been
yeah.
told not to celebrate in that way again. So maybe it's lessons learned, at the end of the day from it. But I do take your
Mm,
point, and I do agree. Sometimes the Dock's decisions they're not very consistent, and some people would argue they're favouring the bigger teams. Again,
mm,
people have their own opinion on that, but I guess Stops is there for a reason, and I'm sure we're all going to face Stops at some point this season, one way or the
yeah.
other.
Yeah, I agree. And I sort of think that I can understand why Dops is there. And at the same time, I like that it's there. But um, it just sort of seems where by giving a player a ban, you've then also got to look at the player that he injured. And I
Yeah,
think the ban the player should get should kind of equate to the amount of time that the player that they injured is out for.
yeah. No,
So
I agree with that. Yeah.
it just doesn't, for me, that just doesn't make sense.
Coming on to the team, understand that Hamonic will miss the game against the Clan. I think he's on a ban, isn't he? It was at 2 games
Hmm.
for the boarding call. But who would you say your key players this season, and who should the Clan be watching out for on Saturday?
One player that I think he hasn't got many goals of yet, but Yanni Kivilati, he's such a good player. He's got a couple of
Yeah,
goals, a few assists. He's got good hands. He's got speed. He's definitely a very good forward. Then, of course, you look at a homegrown player in Luke Ferrara. Again,
yeah,
Luke he just gets on with his job. He's a great forward, and he's an asset to British hockey. Um, and then you sort of look at Yanni Lokkonen, and he's another good player. And then we've got other players, say Dane Gibson. He was a forward. He's now playing D, but it's kind of good that we had one particular game where we ended up scoring two shorties,
right.
and that was literally through having a D that used to be a forward. So then you can put your sort of offense into force, and again that kind of shows that we've got the firepower, and again we've got a good sort of team. And you look at Alex Forbes again, he's one of these where I think sometimes he can be seen as a little bit of a fringe player, but he's very much a utility man. And at times this season, when we've been short bench, we've had to play him on the D. And to be fair, for a forward, he has done a really good job playing D. And again, that you look at players like him that very much unsung hero of the team, and he's come in when we've been short benched. And I think it's kind of difficult sometimes. You might see it on Saturday that whether he plays or not, that you'll notice he'll be there, and he'll be getting in, and even he's even in there and getting a few completions in. And for a player like him, he's not the biggest,
Right.
but for me, I think he's pretty much an unsung hero in the team.
Yeah. One guy also we'll be keeping an eye on who has a five connection is Bloodoff. He's had a slightly slower start to the season, but he's always dangerous, and it's a player I
Yeah,
rate. Yeah, a bit of a sniper. How's he done, do you think, this season so far?
he's been quiet as you've said, but I think it's one of these that sometimes it can take certain players a bit of time.
Yeah.
But I think for Evan, it's one of these that it's difficult because you know that he's got experience of the league.
Yeah.
So you kind of think, oh, we should get into it pretty quickly. But I think sometimes I look at it as you kind of have to look at the lines that they end up playing with. And I kind of look at certain players. We've done a lot of moving around of the lines,
Yeah.
partly for being short benched. But it's just one of these that we've just had to do it. And I think this is the thing. If we can sort the discipline sort of side out and not be short benched at times, then that might sort of even it out. And then you might end up that sort of certain lines will get more offensive action.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. When I did a preview of the Coventry game that was postponed a couple of weeks
Mhm.
ago due to the ice issues, I did look back at your squad and I did look back at your lines to try and predict what lines you may have in that game. And every night time I looked at it, the lines had changed.
Yeah, yeah, and that.
So I made closest guess as I could. I think
Mm,
that time you had some suspensions, you had a couple of injuries as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens come Saturday, but I'm sure Blaze will give us a good game for sure. In regards to the Clan, do you know much about them? I mean, we're still, as Clan fans, just really getting used to our team. We've only seen sort of 3 away games,
mhm.
competitive games this season. You got much awareness of the players or any players you think could cause Blaze
I mean,
problems on Saturday?
I had a bit of a look, and it's one of these where you look through certain teams and you sort of like there's a few that you're not really sure, but obviously
Yeah,
Roy's looking fairly good on the stats so far this season. And
yeah,
again, I know most of the time, particularly as opposing fans, you really having to go on stats and until you play a team.
true.
Um, and again, I sort of think if he's getting some early points for you, and he seems to be doing pretty well for the games that
Yeah,
you've played, and you've had some tough games.
yeah.
So I think he'd definitely be one to look out for.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We've brought him in. He's also an assistant coach, and some people, probably including myself, expected maybe him to take more of a back seat, but that's certainly not been the case. He's been playing on that top line with Dyson Stevenson, who's our captain, and Colton Yellowhorn, and he's been looking pretty good, and he's contributed in every game. So well, I think Clan fans like myself will be looking for big things from him. It's always a good guy to have in your team, but a guy you hate when he's playing against you, especially when he's
Yeah,
playing for Sheffield.
definitely.
Yeah, so in terms of the Clan, we've had some off ice issues with an arena. This will be our homecoming game on Saturday. Close to 3,000 tickets already sold for the game, so we're expecting a pretty much a sellout on Saturday. Difficult to see how the game will go, but any views around that off ice issues with Clan? Did you know much about it down in Coventry? What was happening with the Clan? What was your views on it?
I mean, I heard a little bit of little bits that people were saying, and for me, I just wanted the Clan to take to the ice pretty much, and you've got a nice little arena there, and to be honest, I think compared to some in the league, it is probably one of the best for its size,
Yeah,
and for me, I always look at the noise that's generated from the Braehead Arena, and it's pretty amazing when you look at certain clubs, and when you think of the teams that we've lost in the recent past, when you look at Hull, Newcastle, then you look at Edinburgh as well, and to lose another team, and I don't think it would have been good, particularly for the other Scottish teams,
yeah,
because obviously I know you kind of have to do it where you play each other a lot more often. But when there's
exactly.
not many, it's kind of difficult. And I don't really know how Edinburgh managed to do it in the past when it was pretty much only them.
Yeah,
But again, like I say, for me, Glasgow Clan are very much part of the Elite League. And I think it would have been a shame if you weren't on the ice this year. Now, thankfully, you are. And that has kind of given Coventry a little bit of a helping hand, particularly in the Challenge Cup, a competition which hasn't exactly been our friend in recent years. I kind of think it's probably where I sort of mentioned where we take till December to get going. That is the reason why, because we're in the Challenge Cup and you're sort of thinking, well, hang on a minute, we haven't really started that well in the league. So we need to kind of focus on the league more than the Challenge Cups. And that then goes by the wayside. But then obviously this year we've kind of somehow managed to get a few surprise results. And I think it's one of these where in the past we used to always be up there winning the Challenge Cup and winning the league and sort of stuff. And then we sort of changed because obviously we had Tomo back then, and we've gone it through transition through different coaches. We very much seem like a different team to what we were, say, 15 years ago.
Right.
I don't think that I wouldn't say that we're one of the biggest teams in the league as such anymore. But I would still say that other teams probably see us very much as a threat. And other teams, I probably wouldn't have to name them, that they wouldn't like to say that we're a threat, but underlying, they sort of know that we can be and that we are.
Yeah.
And you would understand the sort of teams that I can sort of say that are around our sort of region that you
Yeah.
would hazard a guess at.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Blaze are always a tough team to play. As a Clan fan, it's a team we always find traditionally difficult, because they do work hard. They take that ethic of Danny Stewart, which is a hard-working team. But you also have some skillful players in your team as well who can cause problems. So I think it's going to be a tough game for the Clan on Saturday. I wouldn't like to make any predictions because I've only seen the team 3 times. Could really go either way. I'm hoping home advantage from a Clan point of view makes a difference, but who knows, how it's going to go, because teams seem to be very evenly matched in this league. And I think who turns up on the night and wants it the most and gets the breaks will be the team that will go on and win on the night. So it will certainly be an interesting one. Just one final thing. You've obviously not seen a lot more games this season than I have as a Clan fan. Has there been any teams that have stood out this season to you? Who do you think could be in for silverware this season, or do you think it's a bit early to say that?
So far, the teams that I've particularly seen at the Sky Dome, and I'd probably say Belfast to be up there. They were a very slick outfit, and I know they've done the rebrand. I'm not really a fan of the rebrand what they've done. I kind of like what they had before, but that's just me. But of course, then you've got Cardiff. When we played Cardiff earlier this season, particularly at Sky Dome, we shipped a few goals against them, and it's one of them where you sort of know if you're playing certain teams in the league, you've got to show up. And if you don't show up, they will just tear you apart. And there was one in particular where he basically benched Mott after just losing like 5 goals. And then Headley came in, and to be fair, Heads did really well. He shut them out the rest of the game, and it's one of these sometimes where that's one thing that over the last 5 years has always been a certain thing with Coventry, that at times our D would hang the goalie out to dry, and we certainly did it that game. And it's one of these where we kind of can slip back, and I know you can't do it against certain teams. And like I said, Belfast and Cardiff are 2 teams in particular that I think we know they're always going to be up there. For me, they're 2 of the biggest teams in the league. And then I think pretty much surprise package at the minute is Guildford. Guildford, they've clearly done the homework. And again, yes, they've got a goalie in there where, like we've said, he's a bit flamboyant, but then again, he's a very good goalie. But again, this is the thing. I think there is a number of goalies in this league where it's going to be hard to get a shot past them this year. And I sort of think there are 3 teams in particular that it's kind of difficult having to say sort of Guildford, because you look at them as kind of almost sort of a lesser team, but as the years go on, and the more and more they get into the AHL, that they've kind of built into it and become a threat. Very much of how the Clan have over a number of years, and I know you've said it on previous editions of this, that you look at it sometimes and you still haven't got very much like silverware. But for me, you're still up there as one of the higher end teams, and very much for me, you're kind of like a Coventry size sort of club that we know that we can compete with other teams, but you kind of have to do it in your own way. That you can't necessarily, like certain teams have got budgets that. I mean, you only have to look at the way the league have had to format it now. So there's a limit on the number of players that you can have on a roster, simply to try and even it up within the league, because there were certain teams in the league could have a certain amount of lines and other teams couldn't. They could only run like 3 at a push. So again, it's one of these that I look at that say it's good for having teams like that. And for me, like I just said, the 3 teams I mentioned, they're definitely ones to kind of look at. I'm not really sure. I don't really know what's going on with Nottingham and with Sheffield. Them 2 teams in particular, they kind of, wow. I think the number 1 target for them is to take points off each other. And I'm sure you've kind of seen it from the outside, Survey. They like taking points off each other, and again, that's just, if we can go there, and we've done it in Nottingham, we've gone in there, we've taken 2 points out of their barn, and again, we've done it at Sheffield. And for me, that kind of shows that there's certain teams that maybe, I think, like I said earlier, that there's some that underestimated us and can underestimate the Clan as well. But again, this league is so tight, as you were saying, and the fact that it's only good for British hockey, how we're constantly expanding, and how I sort of mentioned to one of my friends before, years ago, if you could get a AHL player on your roster, it was big news. You look around the league and there's so many AHL standard players, which is great for British hockey in general. And hopefully, if we can try and push it on to bigger and better things, this league is only going to get bigger.
I really appreciate you joining me on this episode, Robin. I wish you best of luck in the future. Looking forward to the game on Saturday against the Blaze, and be the best team win on the day.
Thank you.
Take care, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.